Today I built another hero for my own warband. The Pale Jackals. The warband is definitely getting bigger and more fleshed out, and you guys know at some point we have to build a lore for them, right? But not today. Today we serve the Dark Gods. On today's menu is a Dark Apostle. As this little soon not to be salamander here has way too much loyalist style armor trim on him, I first need to get rid of that. I simply used a hobby knife for that and desalamanderized his armor. I cut away all the flames of the armor trim and tried to be as neat as possible here to get a more or less generic Space Marine armor trim. I also cut the big salamander symbol on his belt off. I got to cover that up during this kit bash. And after that I smoothened the surface with very fine sanding paper. As I'm going to corrupt it later anyway, I don't mind the small scratches. For the flames on the cape I rolled up some green stuff. My idea was to press it into the recesses on the flames so it becomes one big surface. And as it is, I guess salamander hide with some scales on the back, I thought it's fitting when the skin on the back side is not absolutely smooth, so green stuff could work here very well. I just pressed it as far as possible into the recesses and smoothened it with my silicone sculpting tool. The next bit was his back module and a towering flame icon on it. Obviously I needed to chaosify it and started with the backside. As cutting away the salamander symbol was a bit too much, I thought I could cover it up with a Slaves to Darkness banner bit, but I had to cut it into shape first. And after some very precise eyeballing, I thought it could work and cut away the little knob on its backside and tri-fitted it again. Once that's done, I used some green stuff to hold it in place and maybe fill out the recesses on the salamander's head. I also rolled up a green stuff sausage to cover up the gap between the bit and the flame itself, making the flame appear a little bit bigger as well. For the front side of this icon I obviously needed a book, which I stole from the Dark Angels upgrade kit. But it didn't really fit well, so I had to cut away the little bit of the flame so that I could stick the book underneath and into it. After some back and forth of tri-fitting and cutting, I also cut the salamander's icon flat as well as the back side of the book, so there is a larger area where I could connect these two bits. When that was done, I glued it into place using some green stuff to fill out the recesses once again and super glue. When his back module was done, I cut his little spear into two as I wanted him to have a dark scepter. Maybe you'll remember this bit from the Execrator build. I used that and finally assembled most of the miniature's frame so I could work from here on. For his little arm, I thought that the dragon's face on it could also work as something like a warp entity, and I left it on there, only cutting away some of the salamander's scales. When that was in place, it was time to build his scepter, which was a pretty straightforward process. I just put the Chaos Tower onto it and the stuff was ready to go. Anticlimactic, I know. But not everything needs to be difficult. Once that's done, it was time to think about his front, as this looks really rough at this point. I thought about giving him this huge horned head, but I thought it would cover up too much of the book. I also thought about giving him something like a ritual dagger, but I found this very cool looking cord-like bit from the Saturnine armor that I built last week, and as it just had the perfect shape, I went with this one. I only had to cut away the backside's knob and voila, it looks like it was meant to be here. And in the end, I ended up with the original head of this miniature, as it looks, to be honest, pretty chaotic. I guess the Chaos Gods blessed me with this one. What I wasn't blessed with was purity seals, as I shockingly don't collect any Space Marines and other Imperial factions. So I browsed the internet and found these Chaos Seals by Green Stuff World. A little bit lazy, I know, but it was the most reasonable thing in my situation to get purity seals, as most of my buddies always go overboard with them and don't let me have some for my Chaos Space Marines. These egoists. But anyway, after I placed some of these on the miniature, I used some chain to chain the possible Book of Lorga onto the burning backpack trophy. I just wrapped it around it in a fitting and logical way, clipped it with this age-old clipper and glued it onto some fitting places. Once that was done, it was time for my Pale Jackal's Light Corruption. So I drilled some holes into the armor as well as adding some Agrellan earth on some fitting places and was ready for painting. But before we come to the painting step, I want to thank my amazing patrons for their continued support. So thank you a lot, guys. As always, I started with Neutral Grey, the new name of Cold Grey as I was rightfully corrected, and Wolf Grey as a base coat wet blended into each other. I only make sure that the brighter colors are facing towards the top of the miniature, and added a little bit of white to exaggerate it even further. I use a more or less stippling motion to achieve that. Once that's done, I paint everything that is going to be paper with a 50-50 mix of dark rust and burnt red, and went on with the armor trim that's getting a coat of dark bronze by Pro Acryl. I try to be as neat as possible at this point, as getting this color onto the white would make me incredibly sad, as it is a little bit of a hassle to clean it off, and I don't want that. And for all the other metallics and joints as well as the chain, I used Pro Acryl's Dark Silver. When all these base coats were done, I focused on the book and purity seals, and painted these with a 50-50 mix of Dark Rust and Elfic Flesh, and after that a pure coat of Elfic Flesh. But now onto the interesting parts. The skin, his scales like cape, and the flames. All of these got a coat of dark purple and deep magenta, again wet blended into each other. I also painted a bit of that mix onto the white of the back module to indicate something like emitting light of the flame. For the flame itself, I also added a little bit of white and painted it on the base. I guess base of the flame sounds about right, to indicate the hottest place, even though it's obviously burning in some demonic colors or it's just potassium. Which it isn't, it's demons and I have no idea about chemistry. But anyway, as I'm currently painting some blue Oryx, I thought I could paint the scales on his coat in blue as well, as it, to be honest, looked quite good on the wet palette. So the scales got again a 50-50 mix of dark sea blue and dark purple as a base coat. As I'm going to paint the rest of the cape in a skin-like color, I also used this opportunity to paint his face. I used Buckman's Glow and Light Flash this time and focused them on the most raised parts of the cape and the face. I once again used the stippling motion so I'll get a little bit of texture right from the start. For the most raised parts I used pure light flash and again stippled it onto the edges and folds of the skin-like cape. As the scales were dry by this point, I painted these with Vallejo's turquoise in a dry brushing motion. And I also added a little bit of white into it for the most raised parts. By the way, if you made it up until this point, I would love to encourage you to leave a like and a subscription. And if you already have the new hype function and you like this content, feel free to shout it out, so maybe we'll reach the 5,000 subscribers by the end of the year. I totally forgot to give the trim my verdigris-like effect with Pro Aqueous Jade, so I did this right before I shaded it with Vallejo's Game Wash Black. While this is still drying, I painted all the drilled holes and areas around them with Vallejo's Sepia, focused only onto the damaged armor parts, and waited for everything to dry. And when it was dry, I used a 30 to 70 mix of dark rust and burnt red this time and smudged it onto the same areas as before, with just a bit of paint left in the bristles. And after that I painted his eyes first with Parasite Brown and after that with Sun Yellow. I'm not really sold on the yellow eyes at this point, as they don't stand out as much as they should be in my opinion, and I think about making them green or blue maybe. And when that was done, I only had the armor trim left, which I painted with Pro Aqueous Light Bronze. So what do you think about this Dark Apostle? He obviously needs a retinue and some cultists to throw against the enemy, which will be the next video in this series. Cultists. But that's it for today. Thanks a lot for watching and we are going to see each other in the next one.